Handshakes and all smiles, President Muhammadu Buhari welcomes members. After an opening prayer by former President Olusegun Obasanjo, the Council holds a minute silence for members who have passed away in the last 1 year.
May their souls rest in perfect peace. Amen.
After over 2 hours behind closed doors, the Minister of Labour and Productivity, Dr. Chris Ngige, at a briefing, breaks the news on a new minimum wage approval.
These three organs have permitted Mr. President now to transmit to the National Assembly a new minimum wage bill. The highlights is what you want to know. The figure of 27,000 monthly has been approved for transmission to the National Assembly.
The federal government is, however, augmenting the approved figure to 30,000 naira as new minimum wage for its workers.
So for levels 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as you go up, they're negotiable. But the minimum wage is for the lowest paid, the most vulnerable, the person on grade level 1, step 1. The federal government on its own, for their lowly paid worker, their most vulnerable worker, have agreed that it must be up to 30,000. But for every other person, private sector, state governments, local governments, the minimum wage for the entire country is 27,000.
The Council is also convinced that the Independent National Electoral Commission is ready to conduct the 2019 general elections.
A lot of things have been put in place, and I think we all concluded that it's important for the chairman to even speak to the nation on the preparedness of INEC for this election. That will convince all of us that this forthcoming election is going to be free and fair. He also told the council that they are not lacking in terms of finance.
The approval of 27,000 naira minimum wage hopefully puts to rest the controversy on this matter. The recommended bill is expected to be transmitted to the National Assembly by close of work on Wednesday, 23rd of January. From the Presidential Villa, Gloria Umezuki, Channels Television News.
All right, so we'll focus on that, the minimum wage, as it were. We've got Mr. Dapo Oyewumi here with us. He's the CEO, Center for Law and Business. Thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
And then we'll have Comrade Uche Ekwe, who is the head of International Relations and Liaison to National Assembly for the NLC. He joins us from our studios in Abuja. Good morning, Mr. Ekwe. Let me start by asking you, in the report, Gloria did say it appears it may have put it to rest, but does the approval by the National Council of States do any such thing, put it to rest for you or for Labour?
No. It cannot put it to rest because it's actually shocking that such a respected body will go to sit together to move against the procedures and move against the will of the people and the collective negotiation as set by law by the tripartite committee set by the president. Now, the outcome of that process that took more than a year can be jettisoned by such a body is a shame.
That's what you're calling it, jettisoned? It was negotiation and ultimately the decision to pay whatever amount, doesn't lie with the minister nor the committee that negotiated. It lies with the body that is going to approve and send the bill to the National Assembly. So do you think that's...
That's not the law. That's not what the prescription for minimum wage process provides. The minimum wage law is deduced and derived from the ILO Convention 131 that sets up the mechanism and the process of arriving at a national minimum wage for all countries, not just for Nigeria. Nigeria adopted this law and domesticated it, and that is why those processes have to go. And it has never happened that the council changed the figure or that was agreed by the negotiating body. The minimum wage was never intended to be an award by one of the social partners. It's intended to be an agreement by the social partners. And all the issues, the ability to pay, capacity to pay, all those were all the things factored in the process of negotiation. This is the first time the council is changing the agreed figure.
Well, let me bring it here. Mr. Yuma, I mean, for this particular scenario raises a lot of questions. Lots of people reacting differently to this particular one. Yeah. Some surprised, some say, well, better late than never. Absolutely. So how do you react to this scenario, for instance?
For me, it raises quite a number of issues. One of them, which is very key, is the tango between federalism and unitary government. Because what we have seen here is the Council of State, again I'll address whether it is under their purview or not, saying that, look, the federal government can pay. This is what has been stipulated. The federal government will pay 30,000, the states will pay 27,000. It's bringing up the issue of capacity, diversity of the nation, through federalism, that the states should pay in accordance to their capacity. When I was here the last time, this issue also came up, whether the labor issues should be under the concurrent legislative list or the exclusive legislative list. And the opinion at that time, which also concurred by the other lady you brought on, was that it should be taken off to the concurrent legislative list and let each state legislate as to their capacity to be able to pay. And
that's decentralizing the...
Decentralized labor issues. It's not a matter that's for the federal government.
But the differential now is just 3,000 naira. That's what we're looking at.
Yes.
The federal government is going ahead. We have a lot of federal government workers. Is it a fair distribution, if you will, that federal workers, they get 30,000 naira, and then state workers a minimum, as we heard Dr. Chris Ngige say, a minimum 27,000 naira for a start. Can Labour not work with that?
Well, it's for Labour to decide whether they want to work with that. But the 27,000 is the minimum. So just as the federal government has said, we will pay 30,000. Any of the states too can decide to pay 30,000 or more. It's for the state. It is a minimum. It's a minimum threshold. So if any of the states think they have the ability to pay more than 27,000, they can go ahead to pay more than 27,000.
Let me ask Mr. Ikwe, because, I mean, what kind of consideration is Labour going to give to the issues that Mr. Yumi has referred to, that this matter has raised, which was part of what was discussed the last time, which was that, look, do we take this Labour matter away from the exclusive legislative list and the concurrent list? Because this is what this is pointing to again, the capacity of the states. Because remember, the governors at the time also did say, we all cannot pay the same thing. So what kind of consideration is Labour given to that key question?
Well, I am happy that the lawyer raised those issues, but I also want to say that he said it was a consensus at a time that Labour should be removed from exclusive list to concurrent. And I wonder whose consensus it was, but that's not the issue right now. But just to state that it was never a consensus. But he himself have even contradicted that position by accepting that states can do adjustment. Two, if you have listened to the Minister of Labour carefully, he keep mentioning that the minimum wage is for the weakest of the weakest, the most vulnerable. It was actually Winston Churchill that gave out what seems to be the most profound position on the minimum wage, which shows the need to protect the weakest of all the workers. That's how nations come to agree that you must at all times protect the weakest. What the lawyer is missing is that when people mouth this true federalism, that today, what we might, and the examples everybody tried to cite about a true federal state is the United States. They still have a national minimum. And from the national minimum, because the key word here is the minimum for the most vulnerable workers. And the national minimum is is set in America, where then states, various states, go ahead to increase, but nobody goes below the minimum. And when we even talk about America, let's bring it home to Nigeria. Even while we adopted 18,000 minimum wage, in Edo State, even under Adams Oshomola as the governor, he increased the minimum wage to 25,000, which is what the Edo State government still pays today, even when it is 18,000. So, and the lawyer did not avert his mind to realize that the workers in Nigeria does not exist only in state, federal government, and local government. That there are many workers who are outside there working in the private sector of all categories and of all levels, with all sorts of foreign companies whose intention and attitude would be to enslave the Nigerian worker. The crafting and making sure that labor is in exclusive legislative list is a vision and a dream to protect the people of Nigeria from exploitation. Okay, people miss all this when they do this argument.
So that means you don't subscribe to any of those.
You also forget that.
Comrade, just a minute. Let me just clarify regarding the consensus matter. He didn't say it was a national consensus at any time. He was talking about the last time we had a conversation on this particular matter while he was here, and Ms. Amapepo was here, who also suggested that. So
that's fine.
Yeah, so conclude your thoughts for a minute.
Yes, and people forget, when you come to the ILO, which is the tripartite, the only UN tripartite body, where governments, employers, and workers come together to look at things that happen at the world of work all over the world. That body is represented by nations, not by states of nations. And it is the conventions from there where you drive the laws that govern the world of work. And this is what happens in other nations. For us to want to even abandon those vulnerable workers, because at the end of the day, if our dreams is that majority of the working people will be in the private sector, you now have shut them out, where nobody legislates.
All right, just a minute. Let's bring in Ms. Oyumu to respond quickly to some of the issues raised. He talked about, yes, even in the U.S., I mean, there's a national minimum that they need to subscribe to. So does that, poo-poo that school of thought that, no, you should have states determine what they can pay?
Each of the states in America pay what the capacity is. If I recall correctly, I think the national minimum wage is about $7.25 or thereabouts. I'm not very sure now. And there are states that pay $11. There are states that pay 10.5. Florida, I think, pays 10.5. California pays a